Welcome. I'm here with Kris Holloway, President and CEO of CIS Abroad. She is a pioneer in the international education space and a leader admired by many. In honor of Women's History Month, we get the opportunity to hear from Kris firsthand about her career journey as a woman in leadership. So if you could just give us a quick introduction about yourself and a background on how you got to your career point now.
Who am I? Well, hello, everyone. Really glad to be interviewed here by Serena and by Sarah, two of our fabulous staff members here at CIS Abroad. My career path, well, I think I've always been interested in international education because I lived with exchange students growing up. My senior year of high school, I lived with an AFS student from Cairo, Egypt. We shared a bedroom in my little 3-bedroom ranch that I grew up in Central Ohio. And then my parents hosted a lot of exchange students from Denison University. And so I really grew up with all these different ways of being. And I was like, oh, wow, things are really interesting outside of Central Ohio. So when I went to college, I immediately wanted to study abroad. So I did. And then I joined the Peace Corps. And in the Peace Corps, I had majored in environmental science, but minored in French. And so I was working in Mali, West Africa, in planting trees when I ended up meeting this fabulous midwife and doing most of my work with a midwife in this small village in Mali. And so I came back to the States, got a degree in international public health, thought I would work more in the NGO, international development realm, but sort of fell into international education, as many of us do, and it's just stuck. And so despite spending some time in consulting and public health and some development work, I've been in international ed for the past 18 years. And as I'll talk about here, started as a university relations manager. And now look at me. So there is a path to success. So that's how I got to the place where I am now.
So my next question is, what does women's empowerment mean to you, and how do you work to empower other women in your organization and industry?
So clearly my staff is much smarter than I am, because I was like, this is a really big question. So I really have thought about this. So what does women's empowerment mean to me? When I think about empowerment, I think about becoming stronger and more confident. The word confident means with trust. So it's sort of like trusting that we are enough, that we are here for a reason. And I think being empowered means claiming our voices, claiming our places at the table, and having the agency and the freedom to make choices. So I thought a lot about voice and choice. And I think for me, in terms of how I try to work in this industry, I tried to be, and I think I just naturally am, approachable. I'm pretty down to earth. I really do see the value in everyone and believe people are doing the best they can. Believe it or not, I actually believe that. I'm really curious about people and what makes them tick and what makes them who they are. So I hope that Sarah and Serena, you will say that I welcome talent with open arms, and that you too, as younger women, find that you have opportunities to have agency, to have a voice, to make some decisions and show up to work in ways that embody our mission and vision. I hope that we say yes more than no to good ideas and to new ideas. And there's a quote that I love from Émile Zola, which is, if you asked me, he's a French novelist, if you asked me what I came into this world to do, I will tell you, I came to live out loud. And again, that speaks to that voice that is so important. In my international work, I currently serve in the industry, sort of industry adjacent, I guess you could say, on 2 not-for-profit boards that work to give critical skills to women, one in healthcare and development work, and one in the international education sphere. I really love presenting, so I'm always trying to find ways to share our learnings and our skills that we've done as a company, either through presentations or articles or white papers, or the recent management certificate program we created through the Global Leadership League, which is a not-for-profit I helped to found. I always want to share those things because sharing is caring, and it raises sort of, I don't know what that metaphor is. It's like a rising tide raises all boats, but that's really true. So if you have a skill, give it away and make sure it really helps other people do better at what they do. So those are the ways that I try to empower women, just outside of my work at CIS.
I love that last quote that you gave. It reminded me of the quote that said, when you have everything you need, build a longer table, not a higher fence. And
Oh, yes, please.
yeah, that really resonates with me because I think when you do have things you need and you have the capacity to give to others, it's something that you should do. And I think you do a great job of that, especially internally, but also externally, and making sure CIS is heard in new ways too.
Yeah, great. I'm glad it shows up.
How does studying abroad impact the personal and professional growth of young women? And how do you ensure those opportunities are accessible to all?
Here's what I think, and you can tell me if I'm onto something, and then I would welcome anybody answering that question, either of you. I really see it in the evaluations of our students, that experiencing life abroad develops so many of the competencies, not only that employers are looking for, but that really allow us to elevate our voices and expand our choices, right? So elevate our voices by developing that sense of personal independence and self-confidence, expand choices because we're building social capital. We're building social capital with people all over the world. And that's absolutely critical, especially if you're coming from an underrepresented group. So some of the sample learning outcomes are just that. My sense of personal independence and self-confidence has increased. My ability to think critically and solve problems has increased. I have a better understanding of the values, beliefs, traditions, and perspectives of individuals who are different than me. Like, think we need that skill right now? I do believe we do. And so I think that experience itself of being away from home is critical to self-differentiation and claiming one's own place in the world, as well as realizing sort of paradoxically how small the world is, how we as humans all want the same things. We want to be free of suffering and to lead meaningful lives. And I feel like the first time that I went abroad was the first time I truly felt like I was an American citizen, that I belonged to the world rather than to my family, to Granville, Ohio, or whatever. And that's really stayed with me. So it's made me want to serve, to volunteer, and to be part of creating a country that I'm really proud of. I don't know if Sarah or Serena, you would want to answer that from your perspectives in terms of how studying abroad impacted your personal and professional growth.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing for me was that self-discovery aspect of it. There are different phases, especially the first time you go abroad, that you experience. First, that, wow, the world is a lot bigger than I thought it was. And then as you start to have meals with strangers who aren't strangers anymore and talk to new people and make friends, you realize that everyone is actually the same in a lot of different ways. And we have differences that we can acknowledge, but at the same time, like, we all are experiencing the same types of things across the globe. And once you get the opportunity to travel to different spaces as well and see how other people live, it gives you the opportunity to appreciate other people's cultures and take a little bit of what you learn to back to your home and share that with other people that you love, because that ultimately is what creates more compassionate and loving people. It's just by understanding how we all live and how we're different but the same.
Yeah, I like that. I feel like I read that in I read a recent evaluation that was on, I think it was a University of Maine annual report, a young woman who'd studied with us in Thailand, and she said that she now understands some rights that Thai people have that she never thought that we were missing in the States, and things that we have in the States that the community she was with in Thailand doesn't have. And so I think it's when those cultures are bridged that we can come up with truly innovative ways of doing things, not just taking for granted, oh, well, we've always done it this way, so let's do it this way. I really feel like that's where culture change happens, and it's pretty fascinating. Does Sarah want to answer that, or are you like, no, please?
I'll chime in while I'm here. Hello, everyone. I've kind of been in the background running all of this, but I really resonated with what both of you said. I think for me, it was mainly that wider breadth of like, here's everything I can do with my life. And so similar to Kris, like I also grew up in a town of 5,000 people in Ohio. I'm joining this from Central Ohio myself. Like I have had that upbringing of very small town culture, limited opportunities in some ways, and just feeling like, oh, there was actually this whole other thing that's out here that I wouldn't have really known about if I hadn't taken that leap to go do something so different than anything else I had done before. And I'm so thankful for that opportunity. And I think it's so uh, cool to hear it from the CEO of the company that I now work at and study abroad, that it all just kind of like came together so beautifully for me. And to think that the study abroad experience for the thousands of people that are lucky and privileged and grateful enough to do it get such wonderful outcomes of it, and like we get to be a part of that, is just like so wonderful, and I'm just so happy to be here.
Yeah, it's a kind of a dream, right? Not that it's always easy, but it is, yeah, I agree with that. That's well said. So I think what's interesting that when you were posing these questions, that the second thing is, how do we make sure opportunities are accessible? Because Sarah, you said something like it's a privilege, and it's like, yeah, how do we make it not a privilege? How do we shout out that this is a high impact practice that everybody needs access to? And so we've teased some of this out on our website, and we've been thinking about it a lot lately, in this particular time when we're sending students abroad, shall we say, when there's the federal government under the current administration is, sort of lurching in fits and starts and trying to understand what these restrictions of funding means. And so we have a lot of students who were relying on some federal funding to go abroad, and now they may not access it, right? So we've really been thinking deeply, how do we show up when students need us? So we've sort of articulated 4 key ways that we make things accessible. One is just making sure that we have all the courses online, because we find so many times it's finances, or it's not being able to get academic requirements that are too big barriers. And finances isn't just, can I afford it, but understanding how to afford it. How does financial aid work, and how do you go through the process, and what loans are available, and what scholarships are available? So really making sure that we have that information, and that we can map to those interests and academic goals, but then also offering price points at different point, offering programs at different price points and different points through the year increases accessibility. And then offering customizable elements of those programs so U.S. universities can take our programs, and then make sure it meets cohort needs, like if a group of engineers can only ever go abroad in the summer, or a football team that wants to volunteer can only do it in May for these 2 weeks, whatever that might be. Number 2 would be sources of additional funding. So not just the advising we do along the way, but really trying to have scholarships and grants and discounts, which, Serena, you're intimately involved with. And you've really made that a really elevated, I think, experience for students, and very clear. Number 3 is membership in organizations that specialize in student support and uphold best practice. This is actually a field. I take other people's children, I put them on planes, and I drop them into a place they've never been for a living, right? Like, who does that? So we need to know that we are upholding best practice. So we belong to NAFSA and DA Global Access and the Forum on Education Abroad. And we're members of Pulse and AIEA and OSAC and the Global Leadership League and CANI and all these acronyms I'm throwing out there just to impress you. But we take it really seriously, and this costs a lot of money. It costs money to be in membership, to participate in conferences, to exhibit in the exhibit halls, to have meetings. Like, it's a lot of money and effort, and it continues to make sure we're on the cutting edge of education abroad. Number 4, and probably the most important thing, so I've said accessible programming, sources of additional funding, membership in the organizations. That means we know what the heck we're doing and we do it really well. Number 4 is our well-trained and caring staff. So we really strive to hire and retain diverse staff to try to represent the types of students who we want to go abroad with us. And we also want diverse staff on site as well, people from those countries or who have lived there for a while with various backgrounds, experiences, perspectives, and that really enable us to better understand and serve our students.
Thank you. Yeah, 100%. I think the scholarships and grants, obviously, I personally resonate a lot with. And in times of scarcity, I think it's important that we step up, and it's exactly what we've done. And also through investing in our own as well.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
Okay. What were some of the biggest challenges you faced as a woman in leadership position, and how did you overcome them?
So I thought about this sort of personally and professionally. So personally, I think imposter thoughts, and it's one of the reasons why I present so much on them. And I think it's like a feeling of, I don't say imposter syndrome for a reason. If you want to know more, you can talk to me all about it. But it's not a syndrome. We're not going to label it a syndrome, people. It's just imposter thoughts, which is the feelings of not being good enough, not being adequate for the job at hand. And I want you to remember, I started here at CIS at the age of 39 as a university relations manager, right? And I have worked my way up to president and CEO. And there's a lot of, you'll hear in business, like, to ever come in at a senior level, you need to go out and then come back in, right? You can't rise up in the same organization because people will always think of you in a certain way. And so I think that I've had to try really hard to own this position. I got this company from our founder, right? And so I think it's really taken me time to make sure that I'm addressing those thoughts head on. Why? Because paradoxically, imposter thoughts can be a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? Because they're intertwined with discrimination and bias. So it's really important for me to know how they show up, see them, let them go. Let them go. Because like ignoring them or giving them too much power is disastrous. I'm not going to do that. And it's really been amazing for me to see these women that I'm like, oh my gosh, you're a VP at Google. What could I possibly bring to this conversation, or whatever my own imposter thoughts are, right? And realize we're all facing the same stuff. We're all going through we all are courageously leading with, not despite, with imposter thoughts. And so I want to remember that courage, which comes from cœur, which is heart. Courage means you are continuing on, not because you're not afraid, but you are afraid and you're going through it anyway. And I think that's what's so important for us as women to remember, especially as women to remember. I also think it's just human. And if you're a woman of color, I think it's doubly important to remember that, because there probably is some discrimination and bias going on there. So professionally, the most difficult challenge, it was the pandemic, right? Facing that just as a human was terrible, because I'm a wife, a daughter, a mother. So I had all my adult children coming home. I'm trying to bring all these students back safely. I'm trying to save my business when we're going down the hole. And so I feel like I had to face the brutal truth with perseverance, right? And so I think that grit and resilience has come out of that. But I think there's also a little PTSD. Like, I can still kind of get into emergency management mode and be like, calm down, Kris. This is not an emergency. You can take a breath. You can face this issue with less urgency and more calm. So those are the two pieces that I probably still wrestle with and always will.
Going off of that, then, looking back, what advice would you give your younger self when you were first starting your career, now that you've gone through all of that?
Now that I've gone through all of that, I would have said to my younger self, find this thing called ikigai. Find it when you're young, oh young one. So ikigai is something that I found several years ago. It's a way we lead CIS abroad. I know all of you young ones who are wiser than me already know about it, but ikigai is this beautiful Japanese concept of your reason for being. And it really has to do with these 4 ways that you can live a balanced life. Doing what you love, which is your passion, doing what you're good at, which is your profession, doing what you can get paid for, which is your vocation, and doing what the world needs, which is your mission. And it's really, you spend your life trying to get those in balance. If you make too much money and you don't love it, are you going to be happy? No, you're not. If you're really good at something, but the world's not going to pay for it, are you going to love it? No, you're not. And so it's just trying to figure out how you balance these things as a life, right? Sometimes that pleasure might have to come outside of your work because you're putting kids through college. And so for me, I feel really lucky that I found this field because I feel like so much of those are in alignment for me. So I feel so grateful to have those in alignment. And then number 2, I think I feel like realizing that that it's not all about you, Holloway. The world's going to say heroes are individual and self-made and all of this. And it's like, maybe not. Maybe it's, yes, we are wonderful and we're trying our hardest and all of this, but it's also like our ancestors, and it's also our sisters and our brothers, and it's also our community. It's like we're all in this together, and we are only as good as the people we surround ourselves with. So do that well. Do that well. And I've always had amazing friends, but I think I put pressure on myself to kind of, do it alone. And it's like, oh no, I've always had all these people with me. And I think maybe if I'd realized that earlier, I would have, striving would have been easier and less energy intensive. So those are the 2 pieces of advice I would give my younger self.
Okay. And one more question. Who have been the most influential women in your life and why? And are there any women, either historically or contemporarily, who inspire you?
Oh, so many. So I think first to start with, I'm a writer. So I think about Mary Oliver. I'm reading Owls and Other Fantasies. So Mary Oliver, as a poet, she was out here. I live in Massachusetts. She spent a lot of years on the Cape. And it's like, she really helps me understand my connection to nature, which is really important to me. I think of Geraldine Brooks, who is an author, who's just a beautiful writer. Anne Fadiman, who's a beautiful writer. So I think of those female writers that have been really important to me. Then I think about Dr. Irene Butter, who is my mentor and advisor for graduate school. She's a Holocaust survivor, and I had the great privilege to write her memoir with her called Shores Beyond Shores, From Holocaust to Hope. And she is at 94, y'all, is still out there speaking, protesting. She's for peace. She's all about it. And she says no to authoritarianism. She says no to genocide, and she shows up every day to do the work in her sweet, sweet, funny way. So I feel like Irene inspires me every day. Monique Dembele, who's the midwife I worked with in the Peace Corps. I learned so much about women's health and women's bodies. Attended my first birth there before my own. At the tender age of 22, I worked with her. So I feel like she really set the stage for what I expect and what I know about international health and women. And, lived in a small town just like you, Sarah, like a small town of 3,000 people, and did this amazing work, super humble, and did really amazing work with no electricity and no running water, right? Like, what the heck? Our lives are so easy. So I think about Monique. I think about Irene. I think about my mom and my sister. My mom is a social worker. She worked in Russia. She worked in the States to help people with drug addiction or not get addicted to drugs. My sister is a teacher. She teaches sex ed in high school, y'all. Talk about a hard job. So I think of those two women because they just show up and they do the work. They just show up and they do the work. I think of my work colleagues and my friends, all of you, like we just show up and we do the work. Is it easy to be in international ed right now? Sometimes it is not. But you know what? We come, we assume best intentions, and we do the work. And so I want to leave that with that idea of like what you will achieve in your life is like part luck, part grit, part talent, and so much connected with the environment and the people around you. So work and live with wonderful, talented, honest, caring people, and you will become more so. And I think that is what's so important to remember in sort of this time when we're thinking about how women show up in our lives. Like we're really all in it together in this massive sisterhood.
That's a beautiful message to leave us on. Thank you. Thank you for taking the time today with us. I personally learned a lot, and I know that anyone that sees this will resonate with it too. So happy Women's History Month.
Happy Women's History Month.